From aircraft to failed cruise ships, here are 10 amazing abandoned vehicles with cool stories. (1947) Buick Hearse. When photos of a strange, customized Buick Hearse surfaced online in 2014, the internet was immediately set abuzz. Complete with an ornate casket-holding cargo section, broad windows, and golden angel details, it was a far cry from the original design. Built in Michigan as a standard 1947 Buick Roadmaster estate wagon, the vehicle was later shipped overseas to Greece and converted into a hearse by some unknown owner. After replacing the rear passenger seat with the cargo hold to transport a coffin, additional ornamental trim, angels and tail fins from a 1956 Chevrolet were also added. Inside, electric candelabras and ornate crosses decorate the rear compartment for those dearly departed. 18 windows, including several in the roof, allowing onlookers to view the deceased. After laying to rot and rust in a field for years, a man named Dante Fontana from Italy spotted the car and promptly bought it, and has now set up a Facebook page to detail the restoration. Canada's Space Shuttle Replica. In a small theme park on Prince Edward Island, Canada, a full-scale replica of the Space Shuttle Columbia sits in the middle of an abandoned field. Once part of the theme park known as Science Fun, the shuttle replica was one of only 6 replicas in the world with access for the general public to walk through and investigate. The centerpiece of the theme park known as Great Island Science Adventure Park, the Space Shuttle was designed and built by the owners to attract kids of all ages who had an affinity for space exploration. For 20 years, theme park welcomed visitors to the location who were treated to a full-scale replica of the ill-fated Space Shuttle Columbia in the Canadian province. Built in the 1980s, the shuttle in Atlantic Canada was part of a larger complex that housed a science center, planetarium, dinosaur museum, and other activities. Stretching nearly 40 meters long and 5 stories high at the tail, the full-size replica allowed visitors to enter through the main hatch in a true-to-life representation of the crew's living quarters. Mock-ups of all the major equipment was included, as well as mannequins in flight suits and spacesuits similar to those worn by the astronauts. Visitors were then able to visit the flight deck, allowing them to sit in the commander's seat or go to the cargo bay, the rear portion of the shuttle that was turned into a science center with hands-on activities for kids. And now for number 8, but first be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to join us here at Titanic for more awesome content. Ecranoplan. During the Cold War, as the United States and the Soviet Union worked against one another to build bigger, better weaponry, a Russian-built flying boat known as the Orlyonok became an entirely new class of vehicles known as Ekranoplans. Originally designed by Rostislav Alexiev, who had previously made a name for himself designing fast hydrofoil boats, the Orlyonok became an effective ground vehicle later copied for both military and civilian use. Hydrofoils use metal foils to lift the hull of the boat out of the water, resulting in decreased drag and increased speed. Able to achieve double the normal wind speed, the Orlyonok was in a class all its own. Trapping air between the wings and the water, the Orlyonok glided above the surface, making it more fuel efficient and much faster than boats. But Alexiev needed to justify how useful his design was, so in order to get funding, he made the case that the Orlyonok was designed to move troops and supplies quickly over water. Unfortunately, his secret design was not a well-kept one when, after years of prototyping and testing, a US spy plane captured images of the aircraft. But all was not necessarily lost. After analyzing the images, US intelligence deemed that it could not fly and dismissed the invention. But they were wrong. The Orlyonok was able to reach a top speed of 249 miles per hour and carry 150 personnel per trip. Its ability to take off and land on dry land meant the Ekranoplan was capable of delivering troops on a beach for an amphibious assault. Even though the design was a success, the Orlyonok and all other similar vehicles were retired in the early 1990s when the Soviet military focused its funding and research on nuclear submarines. Unfortunately, the need for specialized equipment to create such aircraft meant that the design, although unique and effective, was ultimately scrapped. Concrete ship Gutian. Known as the world's largest concrete ship, the Gutian, a 3,000-ton ship that made its first voyage in 1974, was built at a time when there was a steel shortage in China. Launched as a way to bring in a new age of sea voyages, the ship would only sail once before officials realized it would cost too much to power the concrete ship through the waters. The 345-foot-long, 48-foot-wide ship was promptly driven ashore and grounded, later becoming a popular spot for locals to squat. It also attracted tourists, becoming a minor attraction for 40 years after being beached on the banks of the Mingjiang River. Later used as a training base for the Fujian Ship Communications College, the Gutian, at first deemed too expensive to destroy, it was later prepared for demolition in 2013 after the land on which it sat was purchased for redevelopment. It took 3 months for workers to dismantle the 3,000-ton ship using heavy machinery to take apart this massive vessel, built to herald in a new age where China had mastery of the sea. The Shamrockaway Motorhome. It's not every day that you spot a motorhome built from not 1 but 4 cars. Such is the case of the Shamrockaway, a strange stacked custom motorhome built from 4 1962 Buick station wagons. Built in the 1960s by a Buick enthusiast named J. Dennis McGuire in Michigan, the strange-looking vehicle was crafted from 1 station wagon in the middle with another split in 2, the front and back ends welded onto the first. Pieces from 2 other Buicks make up the top section of the vehicle, stacked on top of the first. The motorhome also had a completely custom gearbox that allowed all 4 front wheels to turn together, an early precursor to modern steering methods. Weighing in at almost 10,000 pounds of curb weight, the Shamrockaway stood 6 feet tall with a length of 28 feet from bumper to bumper. With such a large vehicle, it took 2 gas tanks to run, but inside it still had modern conveniences like a kitchen, a stowage area, and even a bathroom. But the Shamrockaway was not the first vehicular invention of McGuire's. He also converted a 1942 school bus into a camper and transformed a 1958 flexible coach, a type of bus, in the 1960s. It just proves that even if necessity is the mother of invention, so too is the love of a good car. MAZ 543 Redoubt. As the Cold War gained momentum, the Soviet military needed a mobile, fortified site for defensive weapons. In an attempt to create a vehicle that was both easy to move and quick to relocate, the USSR developed a protected machine on a truck chassis that was fortified and mobile. Starting in the 1950s, various methods and mechanisms were developed and fine-tuned, but it would take almost 20 years for the Ministry of Defense to present a new concept of protected vehicle for command and control points. Codenamed Redoubt, the heavy truck with the capacity of 19 to 22 tons was adapted to operate in conditions of high humidity and dust and from -42 plus 50 Celsius at altitudes of up to 3,000 meters above sea level. With high cross-country capabilities and maneuverability in difficult conditions, the Redoubt was a massive machine that unfortunately suffered from various problems, including extracting it from frozen ground. After making some design modifications, the machine was brought into a prepared pit, allowing it to dig in and turn into a full-fledged bunker. Capacity for the machine was estimated at 10 people with 3 aircraft armchairs and various phones and displays for mobile communications. Many military leaders became interested in the Redoubt and supported the idea of mass production, but the Soviet defense minister believed it would be too costly for the Soviet budget, and unfortunately, without even wanting to see a demonstration of the Redoubt, the vehicle was scrapped. The Spruce Goose. During World War II, the United States looked for ways to ship supplies and trips overseas to Allied Britain. But with ocean travel a grim proposition with the threat of German U-boats lurking beneath the waves, the US Navy had to develop something more safe to deliver the payload they needed to make the trip worthwhile. When Howard Hughes, the Hollywood producer and aviation pioneer, decided to try to tackle the problem, he came up with the idea to utilize birch trees to create an airplane that would fly across continents and land in ports across Europe. Standing 5 stories tall and with a 300-foot-long wingspan, the H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, plane could transport 750 troops at a time and hold a Sherman tank inside. After spending 5 years on development, the plane, the H-4 Hercules, flew only 1 time for 1 mile. 16 months after the original idea, the project was abandoned after a pile of failed prototypes and little progress. With Congress spending $18 million for 3 aircraft that could be deployed in the midst of World War II, the airships were expected by the end of 1943. But when that time came and went, the project seemed to be dead in the water with no airplane delivered. After Hughes spent between $5 and $7 million of his own money to keep the project afloat, the vehicle was still in development in 1947. But to prove its worth and to justify the spending, Hughes still wanted to show off his efforts. Bringing the Hercules into the port of Long Beach, the plane was taxied down into the harbor, and with all 8 high-capacity engines running, the plane rose to about 70 feet in the air, where it stayed for about a minute at 135 miles per hour. Luckily, Hughes' display proved the Hercules could fly, satisfying Congress who were worried about misappropriating funds. Hughes and his company later turned over the other contracted aircraft, but kept the original for himself, returning it to his hangar where it disappeared from the public eye. After spending approximately $1 million every year between 1947 and 1976 to maintain and upkeep the plane, Hughes later donated the plane to the Evergreen Aviation Museum in Oregon. Although it cost Americans $18 million, Hughes funded another $5 to $7 million to get the plane in the air. Unfortunately, the same way the H-4 Hercules disappeared, so too did Hughes, as he descended into a recluse not long after the Hercules was finished. Now dubbed the Spruce Goose, the plane would go down as one of aviation's most notorious projects that never quite lived up to the hype. Abandoned hovercraft. A district in Mumbai, India, might seem like the most unlikely of places to find an abandoned hovercraft. So how about 2? Sitting in a port, the abandoned hovercraft carcasses of the Triton 1 and the Triton 2 are the remnants of a British-built vessel that never really seemed to get off the ground. Beginning in 1996, hovercraft services began in India, ferrying more than 1,000 passengers every day between Chowpatty Beach and a suburb of Mumbai. But it seemed to be an ill-fated venture, as jetties and access roads that were to be built to the beach landing never materialized. When local fishermen began to anchor the boats in the path of the hovercrafts, the vehicles were obstructed from entering or leaving the landing zone. Even though the hovercrafts were successful at sea, bureaucracy, insufficient infrastructure, and local opposition combined to sink the service before it got off the dry land. Officially terminated in 1998, the hovercrafts are now abandoned on dry land. Although they were only built in 1992, the elements have taken their toll on the vehicles, and they now sit in an abandoned graveyard, battered by the elements and wasting away. Some also say that with a new hovercraft venture coming to light, the original vehicles were broken up for scrap, still giving them an opportunity to reach their potential, but not in the way the original designers of the Triton 1 and 2 initially planned. Abandoned Ukraine excavators. Up until 9 years ago, the Morzov open-cast mine was one of the most active mines in Ukraine. Now, hundreds of coal trucks, once loaded every hour by huge excavators, stand abandoned and rusting. Operating until 2009, the company barely survived the 90s. When a power outage due to unpaid debts took over the mine, the Soviet and German equipment was left abandoned and the staff reduced, resulting in the quarry quickly filling the once busy mine with groundwater. With an estimated number of deposits of coal that would allow for 20 more years of active production, the site, which is now littered with large bucket excavators, is slowly being taken over by nature, with grass and trees now growing in the mining areas. With many of the machines built for the Second World War, the Morzov mine is a stark reminder of the industrialized Soviet Union. After it was dissolved, Ukraine became independent and didn't need so many industrial sites as entire cities were abandoned. The site began operation in the late 1980s, producing more than 1 million tons of coal per year. But being closed for so many years, nature has found a way to endure, with water and vegetation once again taking over the land. SS Aquarama. Built in 1945 as a troop transport ship for the Navy during World War II, the SS Aquarama, originally named the SS Marine Star, made only one trip across the Atlantic before combat ended. The ship was purchased in 1952 by a Detroit industrialist who spent the $8 million converting it into a cruise ferry ship, taking passengers between Detroit and Cleveland with the occasional stop in Buffalo. There were 9 decks with 4 restaurants, 4 bars, movie theaters, and even recreation areas. The ship could also hold 160 cars and 2,600 passengers. The SS Aquarama spanned 520 feet long and weighed 12,000 tons. The largest passenger ship to sail on the Great Lakes, the size and luxury of the ship came at a price, with operating costs being too much to keep up with. After various mishaps and changing hands a few times with ill-fated plans to revitalize and refurbish the ship that never materialized, the ship later ended up sitting for more than a decade in Buffalo, with plans to turn it into a casino. Ultimately, the ship ended up in Turkey, where it was scrapped in 2007, putting the rest of the dreams of the SS Aquarama from reaching its full potential as a luxury ship for elegant travel. Thanks for watching. Which abandoned vehicle did you think was the most interesting? Let us know, and be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.